Welcome to another video on Anglo-Saxon and Norman history. Today we have finally made it, folks. We are going to be studying the Battle of Hastings in October 1066, by far the most well-studied and famous battle in English history, which would see the King of England, Harold II, and the Duke of Normandy, William, clash in a little field down in the south coast of England over the crown of a kingdom. So we're going to begin by describing the strengths and weaknesses of the English housecarls and the Norman knights, and we're then going to move on and look at what actually happened and why Duke William won. To begin, let us have a go at this GCSE question. It's worth 4 marks and it should take you no more than 4 minutes. You should describe 2 key features of an Anglo-Saxon Witan. So what was the Witan? You have to write 2 things about it, and each key feature needs to be expanded with examples. So have a go at that one, and then we'll be ready to begin. So, describe 2 features of the Witan. What could you have for that? It was the king's advisors, basically. It offered the king advice on anything foreign or domestic, but the monarch didn't have to listen to this advice. You could also write down that the king appointed people to the Witan. This usually meant bishops, archbishops, earls, thanes, very important people. It was involved in crowning a new king. It was also involved in the funerals of dead kings. So, for example, Edward in 1066. 2 of these would get you full marks. So try to be as detailed as possible. So let us begin by looking at the 2 armies of Anglo-Saxon and Norman society. The Anglo-Saxons had housecarls, seen here in the top diagram, and the Normans had knights, as seen in the second diagram. Both of these were the creme de la creme, the best bit about each army. So our first task for today is for you to read the information sheets on English housecarls, as well as page 33 of the textbook, and it is to label each part of a housecarl and each part of a knight. The housecarl is the top image, the knight is the bottom one. Then you must explain the strengths and weaknesses of each type of soldier. This should take you 10 minutes to complete, and it should be as detailed as possible. Off you go. So let's begin with the housecarl. So, housecarls, what could you have? Well, they would have chainmail. Chainmail is very heavy, but it's really good. It prevents piercing and slashing damage, but it wouldn't do anything against bludgeoning damage. So if someone hit you with a club, it could break a rib or it could bruise you. It would still be very sore. You would also have a coif, which is a chain hood. It protects the head, the neck, and the shoulders. Very good protection, but again, adding weight. Helmets made of steel with leather inside. They were conical in shape, so they're quite pointed. Both Normans and English fought with these helmets. It's got a nasal guard or a nose guard, which it protects the face while still allowing the soldier to see. Underneath their chainmail, they would have a gambeson or a gambeson. It's a padded jacket, and you wear it under the mail. The reason why is it's extra protection against you. It offers cushioning against a blunt object. So if someone hits you with it, you've got this leather under your chainmail to protect you. Sometimes they would actually stuff things like feathers between their gambeson and their chainmail for extra protection. That's where we get the term knocking the stuffing out of someone. Because if someone hit you so hard in the battlefield that some of your stuffing came out, that must have been a very, very powerful blow. Their main weapon was the Danax, which was a massive 2-handed weapon. Originally from the Vikings, but the English used it. It could easily cleave a man's skull in 2. However, by fighting with the Danax, it means that housecarls couldn't hold their shield. Okay? They would also have a sword, as you can see. Housecarls are very high status men, so they would have a good quality sword. They would also have a sea axe, which is a small little dagger worn at the waist, and it wouldn't really be used to fight with. It would be used to finish someone off. So if you're fighting with a sword, that small dagger could be used to finish someone off. Okay, if someone raises their shield to protect themselves, thus exposing their underarm, a housecarl could then take out their sea axe and stab that person with it. Okay, their shield, Saxon housecarls fought with two types of shields. They might have a tear-shaped shield, as you can see here, longer, protects the entire body, or they might have a round shield, like the Danish or the Viking style. Shields were very important. They would probably be worn with braces on their arms, fan braces. That way, when a blow hit that shield, it wouldn't hurt the arm too much. Again, these shields were not flexible, so if a heavy blow hit a shield, it could potentially shatter your arm, the bone in it. So you'd need those leather braces on your arms to take the blow. Other weapons include a spear, javelin, things like that. But as you can see, housecarls were so well equipped. These guys were professional soldiers. They were very difficult to fight. Advantages of the housecarl: they use a very strong and disciplined tactic known as the shield wall, where they overlap their shields, and it's almost impossible to break through. Even for knights and horses, it's hard to break through a good old-fashioned English shield wall. Their axes are brutal in battle. They can easily bring down a horse, and they're heavily armored. They're very well disciplined, and they're very strong, so they can keep fighting. These men were feared. However, there are some disadvantages of the housecarl. When it came down to hand-to-hand combat, they lost their advantage. Housecarls were very good at defense, but when it came to attacking, the Normans probably had the advantage because they were trained in sword warfare. It could sometimes turn a bit chaotic in battle for housecarls when their shield wall fell. Also, they fought on foot. They did not fight on horseback, so that meant when it came down to hand-to-hand combat, after a shield wall collapsed, anyone on horseback would have the advantage. But actually, overall, these housecarls are really dangerous. In terms of knights, Norman knights, very similar. Weapons include a sword, a mace. It could also include a lance as well. They wear the exact same chainmail, the exact same helmets. They have the exact same kite-shaped shield. All as the housecarls. The only difference is they are on horseback. They're saddled. They've got stirrups and spurs, which means they're tightly held against the horse, and they can use their arms freely, so they could fight because the stirrups hold the knight on his horse, so a knight could fight with his sword whilst riding with his legs. Okay, so knights were elite. You had to be trained for years on a horse to become a knight. These guys were devastating. If they charged the front line, advantages, devastating charge potential. They've also got the height advantage. So when it came down to hand-to-hand combat, the knights had the advantage because they were higher, slicing down. However, horses are very vulnerable to attack, especially from a Danax. And horses, when they're charging uphill against a shield wall, lose their advantage. In fact, at the Battle of Hastings, as you're going to see, the knights found it very difficult to break through Harold's shield wall. So even with those horses, they would have struggled with the shield wall. Okay, so two soldiers, two very different types of advantages and disadvantages. Okay, for a deeper understanding to what extent has William been lucky? Well, he's lucky because the weather trapped him in England, trapped him in France, sorry, thus allowing the Vikings to invade first, which drew the English forces north, exhausting them and giving his men an advantage, which we're just about to look at now. Okay, so William finally set sail in mid-September, and he landed in Pevensey on the 29th of September 1066. Okay, he had about 7,000 men from across France, and they landed, as you can see in this map, at Pevensey, which is down, right down the bottom near Norman's Bay. Okay, they landed here, and then they marched to Hastings, which I have circled with a red dot. Now, when the Normans landed here on the 29th of September, they were shocked to see no one was there. The south coast was totally deserted. They expected a large English army to be waiting. That wasn't there because it was up in York fighting the Vikings. So the weather had been a massive advantage for William because William had 2 weeks in the south of England before Harold came to him, thus giving him time to capture lots of towns and villages in the south coast like Hastings and Pevensey, Westfield, places like that, and also to prepare his men for battle. So, what William wanted was for Harold to march straight to him. William had not brought siege weaponry. He did not want to have to attack London because London was a walled town. So, William had to provoke Harold to march straight from wherever he was to face him in open battle. And the only way for William to do that, according to him, was to burn and destroy Wessex. So all those villages and towns which we looked at on that map across the south of England, William's army caused havoc. They burned property, they attacked civilians, and the purpose was to anger King Harold so much that he would march straight down and fight the Normans in an open field, thus giving William another advantage because his knights are devastating on an open field. They met just, I've got this on the map here, they met just north of Hastings at a place that we now know today as Battle, okay? So the Battle of Hastings did not take place at Hastings, it actually took place to the north of Hastings, okay? Now, the Normans were travelling north, heading for London, and their path was blocked at Battle by King Harold's army. You can see here, hopefully, if there's a delay, the map will appear. William's army on the main road heading to London, and Harold's army blocking them. Now, what you can't see here is it's a slight hill. The English positioned themselves at the top of this slight hill, and William's army were at the bottom of it, okay? Harold's men, about 7,000, arranged themselves in a shield wall. Here you can hopefully, again, if there's a delay, it will appear. At the very top, where the abbey is, at the top of the hill, that is where Harold's army was positioned. Half a mile long, shield to shield, defending their position. Their goal was to stop the Normans getting to London, so they were defending. It was up to William, whose army was positioned here, where the plaque is. It was up to his army to break through that shield wall. So they have a slight disadvantage. They're having to go uphill, and secondly, they're having to break a shield wall, which is very, very difficult, despite having knights and horses and all this stuff, okay? Harold was fighting in the middle alongside his men. His earls were there, his housecarls were there, and he was supported by many peasants of the fjord. William's army arranged in 3 rows. At the front, those little dots, those are his archers. In the middle, the blank boxes, those are his infantry, his normal foot soldiers. And at the back, his knights, who we've just looked at. Now, the battle began at 9 in the morning, and William ordered his infantry and his knights to charge the shield wall. As you can see in this artist's impression, that is exactly what they did, but they failed to break the shield wall. For 3 hours, between 9 in the morning and 12 in the afternoon, William's army tried and tried and tried, infantry, knights, archers, infantry, knights, and archers, trying to break through the shield wall, but they couldn't do it. It was locked in stalemate. This would suggest that both armies were equally matched. Now, at 12 o'clock in the afternoon, that is when something very interesting happens. At one point, one part of William's army turns and runs away from the Anglo-Saxon shield wall. Now, we don't know why this happened. We think that it was a planned retreat. They were pretending to run away. Other sources suggest that they were fleeing because they thought that William was dead. At this point, William raises his helmet, shows his face to these men, and tells them to keep fighting. They then turn round and they hack down some of the English soldiers that broke ranks and chased after them. This gives William a clever idea. If he can get his Norman soldiers to pretend to run away, some of the English will then break their shield wall formation and chase after them, thus opening gaps in this shield wall. That is exactly what William does. This is known as a feigned retreat, or a pretend retreat. He uses it 3 times at different parts of the shield wall. His men charge the shield wall, then they turn and pretend to flee. The English, because they think they've got them on the back foot, will then break ranks and chase after them. By using this tactic 3 times, by 5 o'clock, the sun is starting to come down, it's starting to get dark. But by 5 o'clock, Harold Godwinson's shield wall collapsed. It came down to hand combat because of this tactic. And we should know that when it came down to hand combat, William's army has the advantage. Those knights are devastating. We don't know what happened in the next hour. In the chaos of the battle between 5 and 6, the sun's really coming down. It must have been almost dark by this point. King Harold Godwinson was killed. 2 of his brothers were killed as well. Now, we don't actually know how Harold was killed. Some sources suggest he was shot in the eye with an arrow. Other sources suggest that he was just cut down in the chaos of battle. Without their army and with the sun gone, the English fled the battlefield. Thus, the battle was over. William had won. The devastating consequences lay around him. 6,000 dead bodies lay on the swampy, muddy ground of Hastings. Mud, feces, blood, urine and sweat lay everywhere. William buried the 2,000 Normans that he lost in a mass grave, but he refused to allow the English to collect their dead, even refusing to allow them to collect King Harold's body, until they gave him what he wanted, the crown of England. Now we're going to pause there because you need to explain why William won that battle. So, you need to read the extract that I've given you. It's about 1 page on the Battle of Hastings. You need 5 colours, and each colour needs to represent one reason why he lost. Your 5 reasons are William's preparations, so what he did before the battle, the weaknesses of Harold's army, the strengths of William's army, so his soldiers and his weaponry, William's strategies on the battlefield, so what he did on that battlefield, as well as luck and timing. You have to go through and you have to highlight examples to show these, okay? Once you've done that, you're going to draw a mind map, very detailed, very colourful, and you're going to explain those 5 reasons. Writing it up in your own words, explaining how each one helped William win, okay? Explaining the impact that it had on William's battle. That should take you a good 20 minutes. You're going to spend a good amount of time on that, okay? So, have a go, best of luck, pause this video right now, and then I'll go through the answer. Okay, so, very quickly, William's preparations. He landed 2 weeks before Harold came to fight him. He brought wooden timber across from Normandy. This allowed him to build motte and bailey castles across the south of England. He used a destruction technique to destroy Wessex and provoke the King of England to march straight down to him. He brought horses with him, therefore allowing his knights to be ready straight away. So William made a lot of preparations. Secondly, the weaknesses of Harold's army. Well, they marched straight from York to Hastings. This exhausted his men. He didn't have any archers because archers tended to travel on foot. His army was made up of housecarls, but most of them were feured. They were peasants who were unarmoured and they didn't have proper weaponry. They would have been exhausted from that march south. Harold had also lost valuable men at the Battle of Stamford Bridge. Harold was fighting without the support of Mercia and Northumbria because of the battles of Fulford and Stamford Bridge. So those are his weaknesses. Strengths of William's army. Well, he's got infantry, he's got knights, he's got archers. They're all properly armoured. Those are the strengths of his army. His strategies on the battlefield refer to the fact that 1. He opened his helmet to show his men that he was still alive, to convince them to keep fighting. 2. He used the feigned retreat. If you haven't mentioned the feigned retreat, get it in there. The feigned retreat, pretending to run away. Why was this important? Because it opened up the shield wall and allowed it to come down to hand-to-hand combat. If it wasn't for the feigned retreat, Harold Gordonson would not have been killed. Luck and timing, again, very important. William landed. First of all, it was lucky that William's ships made it across the channel in one piece because of the weather. Secondly, William's army arrived whilst Harold was up in York fighting the Vikings. That was lucky. It was also lucky that Harold marched straight down to fight William, because if he went to London, it would have been a different story, because London was a walled town. Next, it was very lucky that King Harold was killed, because the death of the king marked a loss of leadership and the end of the battle for the Saxons. So that was very lucky. In my opinion, luck was the most important reason why William won. If he had set sail in August when he wanted to, if he had landed before the Vikings had landed, he would have had to have fought that massive army led by King Harold. 8,000 men, remember, Harold Godwinson had initially on the beaches of the south coast of England. There's no way that William's knights would have been as devastating as they were on the field of Hastings. So luck and timing were vitally important. Okay? You're more than welcome to rewatch this video. You're also more than welcome to watch the YouTube clip on the BBC on YouTube from the BBC about the Battle of Hastings. Reread the notes and make sure you're happy with this, okay? Right, tune in next lesson to find out what happened when William became the King of England. Thanks for listening.